You can be the hardest working designer in the room. You can ship beautiful work. You can be the one that everybody trusts to get it done. And still, you're not in the room where decisions are made. Because here's the trade-off. The better you get at execution, the more execution you're given, and the less you're pulled into defining what gets built in the first place. Does that sound familiar? Well, if so, stick around because today we're talking about how you can stop being the default executor and start defining what's worth executing. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. How often does your team stare at a blank Figma canvas, unsure where to start? Well, this episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives your team instant access to over 600,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows from apps you love with new content added every week. And with their new AI-powered search, finding exactly what you need takes seconds, whether you're searching by app category, UI pattern, or just a specific feature. And my team and I use Mobbin whenever we're kicking off a new feature. It's our go-to for exploring inspiration and seeing what the rest of the industry is doing. It shortens that early discovery phase significantly, and it's the kind of tool that makes the whole team faster. So ready to level up your team's design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So after 20 years in UX design, bringing startup entrepreneurship speed to corporate scale at Amazon, Kat Lowe learned that successful designers are those who make their work impossible to ignore. And she discovered this the hard way, burning out while working 3 times harder than her peers, delivering excellent work that was invisible because it wasn't aligned with what her organization valued. And the experience taught her that execution excellence alone is a trap. It makes you the person everybody goes to execute, not someone to go to for decision-making. And breaking out of that trap required a different approach, which she distilled into 5 tenets, and we're going to talk all about those today. These tenets helped her shape billion-dollar opportunities through vision and execution, and finding the everybody must win moments to drive alliance, including one worth $7.8 billion in market opportunity, delivered $218 million impact that anybody could have seen if they had just looked. Kat, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I'm so excited to have you on, dig into this today. How is it going?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to be on the show with you, the master of podcasts.
Oh, come on.
This is my first ever podcast. I've been on video, but never on a pod.
It's about the same anyway. It's just anything. I think it's nicer because I don't know what videos you were on, but we get to edit everything in post on a podcast. And
Right.
We cut out all the...
Rather than live.
Yeah, we cut out all the stuff we say that makes us sound dumb. And then we just put the smart stuff in there and everybody thinks we're brilliant. That's the great thing about post-production.
Awesome.
So I know I read a little bit of bio about you, but yeah, you've got an interesting origin story. So tell us a little bit about you. And how did you come to figure out these 5 tenets ultimately? And how did you come to realize that UI excellence and that craft excellence can sometimes be a trap when we're looking to advance our careers?
Awesome. So I'll first start with my origin story about a bus and $20. A bus ticket to New York City and no job waiting for me on the other end. That was me 20 years ago. I'm originally from Taiwan and I moved to Maryland majority of my childhood. Before the bus ticket, a few days earlier, my parents had opened up my graduation program and saw that I did not graduate in computer science, but rather design. Yes, I have lied to them for the entire 4 years of college.
Oh, no. Wow.
This is, of course, they paid for my tuition, thinking that I would be building a, quote, stable future. And at the time, I let them believe that because I didn't know how to explain what I actually wanted. And what I wanted was design plus technology plus human behavior. And that glue or gap does not exist yet to my knowledge at the time. So I just knew that I belonged somewhere in the middle. So my mom drove me to the bus station, dropped me off, and drove away. And New York City didn't really care about my potential. I was young, unconnected, I was alone. But being green means I had nothing to lose. So I said yes to everything. And this is how I ended up pitching work to Hollywood studios and design premieres for movies. And I had to
Wow. Okay.
compete with veterans that were like 10 years in, more experienced than me. And those veterans were very angry. They were angry that they thought I was taking their job. And all I thought was, I'm in the right place. And this is it.
Oh, yeah.
20 years later, I am still thinking about the bus. I still have the exact same persona. I shoot for the moon before I have permission, and I fail before there's any safety net. So this is my core character energy that is needed to be in this space. So for the next 13 years after that, I spent my career going from a senior designer to an art director, so management track. And then the next 7 years, I decided to go entrepreneurship, which is basically working for agencies and being self-employed. And then in the last 5 years, I've joined corporate at Amazon. And right now I design how millions of new products find their first customers.
That's a really diverse background, pitching movies and stuff to, like, you mentioned art director, which to me is more of like graphic design, traditional design. Like, you worked in advertising for a little while, I assume. Is that what you mean when you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then into working for yourself and then ultimately corporate, which is different because a lot of times people will go the opposite. They'll work for corporate for a long time, say, sue this, I'm out, and then they want to work for themselves. And you went the opposite direction, which is really,
Absolutely. And that was deliberate because I really believe that the foundations of design is through the craft, and the craft starts with the fine arts degree and understanding that, the execution aspect of being in startups and being a generalist and super IC, I would call it. And then being in corporate requires a different set of skills that are different than all of those. And I just love being in different places because I have this thirst for what is going on over there. I'm just curious. So my meters always run towards the unknown, what I don't know.
So you've worked for yourself. You've worked at Amazon for a while now. And I want to talk a little bit about this idea, though, that we originally started with, this idea of the craft can be a trap. And I think that depends. Certainly, you'll probably talk about this on where you're working for sure. Mm-hmm. If the company that you're working for doesn't value the craft as much as you do, then clearly focusing on that is not going to get you past where a certain place. When I think about this, and others have talked about this, where the skills that get you here won't get you there. When we think about getting hired at a place like Amazon, FAANG companies in general, craft. But once you've gotten that job, it only takes you so far. I want to know, for you at least, because it's hard to talk in generalities, when did that job start focusing less on craft and more on other skills?
I love this topic. It's very juicy. So I would love to tackle the idea of two pieces. The first piece is what won't get you to the next level is new skills. And then I believe that our skills are like knobs on a sounding board. Some things just needs to be turned up and some things need to be turned down in different scenarios. And it's the muscle that we must build to understand which one to turn at what moment. It isn't about this one is less important than the other one. It's just more about that understanding and practice. So the UI aspect of it, the craft obviously is the basis. Like that is your current role as a designer, is to be excellent at implementing that craft. And you could have different personas, so to speak. The job that I had right before Amazon, I specifically niched down to be the iOS mobile designer SME. And previously, when I was on video, I was doing live talks on Adobe to teach designers on how to push pixels, how to think about the product, and how do we get from vision to execution. That is very tactical and easy to explain because there is like a level of how to do this properly. So that part is the easy part. And then you have the critical thinking part, which is why should you do this way? Why not? The craft aspect of it is one segment. And then as the design moves forward, you talk about design systems. Now you're thinking like, how does this scale up to multiple applications, multiple websites? How do we create the foundation again so that it expands? So then that becomes, does that include craft or is that systems thinking? For me, basically, I spent 7 years working on editing an enterprise level design system at the foundation level. So that means going back to the drawing board, creating a color spectrum that works. So that's also a niche task. Most people just take the color spectrum and apply it. Redrawing icon set from the beginning, which is a hard, laborious labor of craft. Why this and why that? How do you squeeze a concept down into an abstract shape? And then there's typography, which is like how, when you design something, what scale are you doing it at? Or do you just follow guidelines or do you have a perspective on the scale? For iOS, there's a strong belief in taste. They're anchoring on taste for everything. Each company has their own value system. Amazon values scale. Maybe Apple values taste. Meta maybe value like taste as well in some level. There's different levels. So depending on the company you're trying to get into, you really have to conform to what they want so that you can you can speak their language really.
It's hard to know that before you get a job there. The big companies, obviously, Apple has ways where you could find that out. You could talk to anybody who's worked there or blind and apps like that. You can go and do your research. But most designers are not working in FANG. I don't know what the actual percentage is. That'd be interesting to see what like the actual percentage of professional designers working at FANG versus not. But anyway, so I think a majority of us are not. And so when you get into a new environment, it's really hard to know. Like you can ask questions during an interview, but a lot of times people will just say fluffy stuff or they'll lie, or not because they're trying to manipulate you or anything, but because they just don't want to have an awkward conversation, or they can't be honest because their manager might be on the call too. So anyway, that's a really interesting thought. And I'm curious, when we think about this shift for you and understanding now, coming up with these 5 tenets, I want to start to get into those a little bit. But before we do that, I think most designers have this idea that the job is one way and it's often very different. And the things that we need to do is design, especially senior designers and ICs that might not be managers yet. That job is very different. Coming from the entrepreneurial role where you had a lot of leeway to do whatever you wanted, now going and working for corporate and having to report to somebody and being held accountable for certain metrics and things like that. How was that transition for you? Because a lot of people go the opposite way. Did that entrepreneurial background maybe have some impact on how you approached it?
When I had a generalist portfolio, I had a lot of projects to pick from. And that was actually an issue because I didn't know what to pick. So when you have a lot of things, it's hard to narrow down to a subset. And the only real way to know what the other party really wants is to just interview. And I do this as a practice. Every year, I just put myself in a ringer and go through interviews. It's a terrible thing to do, but this is how I kind of test the waters, because I will need to describe what I did to someone and I will feel ashamed when I don't know how to describe it. And then you get to see their reaction on their face. Did the idea land or did the idea did not? I know this is a very tough thing to do because interviewing is grueling, but I've always done it. I've done it for every single year that I've been a designer because I can understand where are the holes and maybe the project's not done. I will get that direction to say, you know what, this is the part I need and this is how I'm going to move forward and when I know the project will be finished. So applying my resume portfolio to Amazon, I specifically said these are the 3 personality leadership traits that I have. So I started out with that. And then I used the examples in my portfolio to demonstrate those qualities so that it's not very confusing to the other party who I am. So I knew that Amazon is really about scale and it's about frugality. What is the cheapest thing that you can achieve at the most maximum impact? It's not about spending the most money and getting impact. So it's different than Apple, right? Apple assumes that high quality equals time equals price. Amazon would be what is the smallest at the biggest outcome. So you have to understand that point of view from the company and then formulate your projects in that lens.
I want to dig into talking a little bit about corporate environment. And this is something I've experienced a lot working at big companies. I've worked at GE, I work at Xometry now. And the one constant, I think, in any place like this is ambiguity, vague ideas. We need to figure this thing out. We don't know where to start. Just start doing the questions like that. And we often get this sort of direction, but not really clear. And so when somebody hands you a vague vision, I imagine this happens a lot at a place like Amazon. What's your first move? Where do you start?
So sometimes when they hand me the vagueness, it comes in 3 formats. It could be 0, didn't give you anything, which is something that I would proactively do. Maybe that is something that I was working on a previous project and I am poking around doing research and I found something. That's one. Second one is that we believe the vision needs to be in a tweet size format, very short. That is also very vague if something's really short. And then number 3 is what altitude is this vision at? Is altitude saving the world or is it fixing this thing over here? So the vision can be broken down into years. So year 1, year 2, year 3, right? So if it's a 1-year vision, I wouldn't call that a vision. It would be like a goal. So it would be a 2-year vision or 3 years. So based on that, I try to figure out what the altitude and the height of what you're asking about. And then based on that is how I draw up a picture. So if the altitude is extremely high, I usually hand over a extremely rough like mock-up. Maybe it's a drawing to just get the other party to start thinking. It determines that level. Or the other way would be to work from what you know today and then start small and then add the parts. And then the parts that are vague, we just block them out. Just ignore them for now.
You mentioned something I want to kind of circle back to and maybe get this question is I think a lot of designers, especially, well, junior designers, but I feel like even senior designers I've talked to, a lot of them fall into this trap where I have a process. This is my process. I do this and then I this and then bam, great software, great design. You mentioned something, depending on who it is, you'll do this or I'll show this or I'll like blah, blah, blah. And you change your working style based on your audience. When you're doing that, how do you approach adapting your style depending on who's in the room or who you're talking to? What is some things that are going through your head when you're doing that?
For example, you can say, what is the end deliverable you think here? Is it to gain alignment from someone? Is that someone us in this internal group? And let's think about the radius of the people. Is the radius just within us or is 1 level out, 3 level out? Or like, how wide does this need to go? And sometimes we might not know that, right? We might say it's only 2 levels. It's just within us and then our bosses. So I think that in the beginning, when you start on any project, you usually want to have the radius as small as possible because first you don't understand the world of things. So you start small. If the end result is that it needs to go up like 5 levels, then the people at those levels are thinking completely different things and they don't have time. So it needs to be instantaneous. They looked at a picture and they got what you mean. So it needs to go into that. So this is where the visual design craft really matters. When they see it for a split second, do they understand what's happening? We're not going through a presentation. This is not a movie. It's 1 static image, or maybe 3 static images at the most. Are those 3 things the key moment parts of this experience? And if someone's walking away with, I don't know, there's a lot of words on there, the idea didn't really land. And I know that's very hard thing to do. It requires the designer to work through all of the details and then remove the parts that don't matter, like Fruit Ninja. Just need to cut away everything until it's down to the core piece.
So I want to dig into these 5 tenets that you've come up with. This is really interesting. And this is how you've been able to break out of this trap. And I want to talk about this. You had an interesting story, an anecdote from Amazon that I thought made a lot of sense here. I'd love for you to dig into. So I want to start talking about those tenets. Tell me a little bit about Cold Start and how these tenets apply or how these tenets help you think about these things.
Cold Start is the concept that when a seller goes to Amazon and lists their products for it to be available in the store, that less than 1% of these products actually generate a sale in the first 90 days, which means that it takes a long time for any new product to be discovered by any customer. That in itself is a problem statement that is extremely vague and extremely high level. There's multiple parts that goes into why doesn't it sell? Is it the way that the store prioritizes in the best sellers, not actually new sellers or new products? Those are all issues that different parts of the company needs to tackle. It might not be in your sphere of influence. This was the idea that our org wanted to tackle, but of course, we don't own every part of the puzzle. So the goal was to make leadership understand the importance of these brand new products. So if that was the case, then the storyline that needs to be written could be written from like a risk perspective. And the risk is that it's not living up to the vision of Amazon, which is we want to have every single brand and we want to have all the selection possible for customers to shop from. If there are no new things, then that means everything in the store will eventually be stale and old and, you're not going to find something. So if that is the most important problem, then we should draw up a concept to show this. We started drawing concepts over almost 6 months. I've drawn up about 500 concepts on ways that this could be done. And at that time, of course, you're just like, okay, these concepts just don't mean these are solutions, but there's like parts and pieces of signals of areas that we need to test the bounds. Is this a hard boundary? Is this a hard boundary? Do an exploration scope.
So that's really interesting because this is different from what a lot of designers tend to do, where they want to have big plans and roadmaps, and I want to like design the end-to-end experience. And I don't know, it tends to feel safe. I don't know if that's like having these, I don't know why I'm just thinking about this, but like why this feels safe. Like, I don't know, a lot of people tend to feel safer when they're designing within constraints. Like I have this thing and I have this 0 to 1 design and I know what I'm designing for. And I have this very clear path and a happy path and things like that. And it feels certain. What you're talking about, like a lot of little experience, like almost sounds like growth design. I don't know if you'd consider that growth design, but like there is no, it's just like little experiments. Try this, try that, do this, do that, and see where those little movements happen.
You're awesome. Yes, I am a growth designer.
Yeah, there you go. See?
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, you never said that, but like I kind of, I had that picture in my head. I'm curious, like, why do you think designers tend to gravitate towards that big holistic plan versus those little incremental experiments like you're talking about?
I think there's so many reasons. One is like people love to be in control of decisions, and they never want to take dependency on someone else and say, if this person will do their job in this design, then my life would be easier. But that's one way. Okay. And then they will want to feel like they can achieve something 100%, which is the ideal, because no one will ever want to say, I don't want to achieve 100. But what if you say this thing can only be achieved 20% and not 100? And that 20% is actually a win. So it's the degree of like how much success you believe in. And in a large company, sometimes the solution, it just don't exist, and you can only solve it a quarter percentage of the time or move the needle by 1 or 2%. And it's not about solving it 100% completely.
This is something that I wonder a lot of people, well, actually, I'm thinking about product managers I've worked with, and I've had on both ends of the spectrum where the really safe product managers who like, I don't want to move forward until we're sure, 100% sure. And then you got other ones like, fuck it, ship it, And I'm curious, like as a designer, you probably work with both types of product managers. I don't know if Amazon maybe just doesn't hire those safe people in the first place. So I don't know what that's like, but I'm curious, like, how do you get those product managers or even other designers who are only willing to move when they're 100% sure? How do you get them to move more towards the other side of the spectrum where they feel more comfortable just sort of saying, we don't have all the answers, but let's just go and see what happens?
Yeah. So it's not just PMs. I feel that way about designers and the people I work with, like everywhere. There's different personalities. Some personalities are like, this is the areas that I own. So they have these strong boundaries, and any issues beyond the line here is not my problem to solve, which is one like a good way to think about things. The other way would be to glue. You're the glue. You say, hey, this is a group of areas that need to change a little. And because of this reason, like this is it. So there's the connector personality, and then there's the execution personality, which both can exist in the same world. So I definitely learned this hard way, because being in SME for like iOS, I had the idea that to be a good designer means that you will do more than 20% or last 20% of the craft that makes you from good to great. Someone that does 100%, not just 80%. This concept is completely the opposite. So it took me a long time to grapple with this level, like this way of working. Let's say 3 years for me to grapple that, hey, there could be a different way of working, and I could be both of these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why you can't. And sometimes, this is one of those things I think it's important to think about, not in black and white, right? There's like always like a gray area. You can't say we should always move fast. You can't say we should always slow down. There are times in certain scenarios where it probably makes a lot of sense to stop and make sure you have the right approach before you move forward. And then some areas where you're like, I don't know, does it really matter? One of the things I like to ask myself is like, what happens if we're wrong? If we're wrong here and the company loses $10 trillion, maybe we should take our time. Or, if we're wrong here and people die because we're working in healthcare and it impacts people's lives, maybe we slow down, we do more research. But if all that's going to happen is like one little thing or someone can't do a thing or someone could blah, 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 whatever, I don't know. It's hard to, come up with an example, but maybe we just move fast. Like, does it really matter?
In this project, so when we were trying to tackle this ambiguous phrase, we had different personalities, right? We had my coworker who's like really good at execution. He's the master executor. He got right in and execute, meaning like he's drawing. And his personality is definitely, as I draw, I am thinking, right? Thinking through as I draw a picture. A lot of people are this way. They go to a whiteboard and they just assume that after they draw it out, answer just magically appears on the screen. So there's one way to do it. They're very visual. And that was me as well for the first 10 years. The latter 10 years, while I entered Amazon and realized like writing skills and other skills of critical thinking in words also matter. So I didn't have those skills. I was very visual. So I forced myself to have those skills as well to be more diversified. So basically, instead of drawing and getting something on the screen, I forced myself to write it out first. So essentially writing out the top level things and then creating a quote drafted plan and say, these are the parts. So I forced myself to think about these core pieces and dream up of the design in my mind without actually doing it first. So this sometimes came at a conflict with the people who just want to draw. So that it made me stand out in our team because I was the person that was saying, hey, okay, these are 5 pieces. Each person could draw their piece. And the reason why I felt like I need to develop this is because I'm essentially trying to not delegate, but create impact through me to others. Instead of saying, I'm the only person that is the major workhorse that can execute everything. I'm going to allow the execution to be scaled out.
I want to talk a little bit about Tenet 2 now. I want to dig into Tenet 2. Customer truth is the only tiebreaker. I love this idea, especially thinking about your work as a growth designer. When it comes to opinions, I like this, I don't like that, I want this, I want that. At the end of the day, what matters, those little experiments that you're running and the data that you're grabbing from that tells you the direction to move. So tell me a little bit about Tenet 2 and how you came up with this one and where this one helps you out every day.
Yeah, and I think this was also very juicy because how do we make sure that what customer wants is what the business is delivering? And what if the business doesn't really align with the research? And if the product fails because we have done something, whose fault is this? That did not listen. So all of these pieces are interesting. And the good thing is that we all believe that if the customer at the end of the day succeeds, then we'll succeed. So we do have a large jobs to be done culture. And when I said that before, I was very focused on writing and doing research. I'm the only one in our org that came up with 2 frameworks for jobs to be done, essentially to boil down ambiguity of what does growth of a sales person mean and what pieces they all fall into, because this is not just about how the tool of the product works best. It's also about, did the tool achieve the end outcome? And our org really takes outcomes as goals instead of like efficiency of a certain tool. These 2 things can coexist in the same world. So at the end of the day, the question is like, what happens when customer research differs from the business? Well, first of all, when you're writing the PR fact or the quote or the tweet, it actually needs to make sense. So where is the person in this? And what are we doing to help this person succeed within the confines? And with Amazon, it's just very much a closed loop system. So the thing about customer truth, there was one time when I went on vacation, I completed the design. When I came back, it did not look like anything that I made because the development made choices like of things that would make it go faster. And I understand the reasonings behind why they made those choices. Okay, I grabbed these components from a different library. I did this because it existed. This one did not. So it totally ignored the fact that it's designed this certain way because of this following reason. And I went the aggressive route. And the aggressive route was, let me create a metric on customer obsession. How obsessed are you in making sure that the customer received the thing? And of course, that's an aggressive way to do it, because that means that I can report on which teams are more customer obsessed. And of course, these leadership principles are at a spectrum. It is also a knob. Sometimes you're not as customer obsessed. Sometimes you are. So what I did was I created a closed loop system, a mechanism. How many of these things that came in that is an issue occurred because of these design decisions? So I tracked them. And then I became a mini program manager where I tracked the burning down of these tasks. Did you burn them down or did you not burn them down? And what you end up seeing, which is obvious, is you get a chart that says it's much harder to change something after it went into production than to just prevent the problem from starting. So because of that, that becomes what I call like the UX QA mechanism. So there's an idea that good intentions don't work. Everyone wants to do things properly. Everyone wants to have high quality, but doesn't actually work in practice.
Oh, wow. How did you track their customer obsession?
Tickets and issues that customers reported. So I go through the log of all of the things that we have to now close. Now, what are those issues related to? Features that we designed that we just pushed out. And what are the reasons? So could we, as a group, map them to the reasons? And I also proved that if we did this properly, then the engineering manager, the PM, we all save time. And I was able to calculate how much time we saved each week and how much time we saved afterwards. And of course, this doesn't scale because this requires each designer to say, I'm going to lead on this principle. We're going to be extremely customer obsessed. And it is an active leadership thing you must take on, which also shows that you are insisting on the best. You're insisting on the best UI. You're insisting on being close to it. We're just not talking.
The next tenet on your list, and I want to compare and contrast what we were just talking about and see how this aligns, but achievable now beats perfect later. So I'm curious, like in that example, we just mentioned this, fixing things once it's in dev is much harder than getting it right the first time. And I'm curious, when we talk about this third tenet, achievable now beats perfect later, how do you reconcile those two almost paradoxical things where the engineers are like, we need to get this out, this component is available?
And the tenet as a whole is meant to close debates. Each one is supposed to be nonsensical. They're supposed to be opposing. So then you have to put them in order in what you're going to do. So that's the tenet number one. If we have a debate, then we use this line to say, because of this reason, this is why we're picking this. So I've also fallen in this trap. Perfect example, doing IA, information architecture. Navigation 1, format something in one way. Navigation 2, format something another way. And then the third party is the stakeholder that is highest paid, the hippo. You ever heard that terminology? Hi. So the hippo has their own opinions, and it might be different from the things that you presented. So let's say you've done all the testing, you've done all the data points, you came with, I've done all the work, please, here's the reasoning. And then there are different levers that you have not considered. And one of those levers could be impact and influence. And influence is a lever that was confusing to me when I first started and said, what does that mean? It means, is there a benefit to our sphere of influence? Who does it benefit? So example could be, we could take something from another team, or we can take something from this team. I understand that your position is that other team's work is best. And that is the right way to go on every level. But the other team will probably not care about us if we have an issue, or we want them to do things in a different way. They're very rigid and hard in their boundaries. So our influence with them would be very low. So it blocks us or blocks a whole org from doing something. when we really need to move. So this is the danger of being very fixed versus being very adaptable. It's like, okay, our side, are we more adaptable to change? If the answer is yes, then they pick the adaptable path, because we must say that our work sucks and be able to say there's something better out there. I'm willing to change my position based on new information.
A place like Amazon over a place like Apple. Apple seems, to me at least, and I've never worked at either, but Apple seems like a place where, we have one big software release a year, right? We have one big update. We have every couple of years they release a big update for something, or whatever their schedule is. Whereas Amazon, it seems like almost daily stuff is just shipped out. And I'm curious, at a place like Apple, this just goes back to understanding the audience, but a place like Amazon seems like shipping faster. People perceive you as higher value to the team. Apple seems like not shipping slow, but being more thoughtful, being more higher craft and taste, and making sure it is that luxury feel. I'm just curious, how advice you would give to people who are looking at different roles. How do you reconcile that idea of shipping faster, achievable now beats perfect later, when it comes to applying for different roles where there might be very different cultures?
Yeah, so on my entrepreneurship work, it was pretty much, we had a small team. The designers were 3 people, and we had all iOS expert engineers. So they were able to produce the quality that you dream of, and they're very small. So it was just very limiting in terms of the scope. The scope was make this as best as possible. Maybe make this micro interaction the best. You can achieve that. So in those scenarios, you should look at the people on the team, what kind of resources you have, the skill level they have, and what their dream is. So yes, you do need an A team for that. Second of all, the scaling fast and doing things, it's more about trust building. When people don't know you and you started this project from the beginning, you came with them with this overarching huge framework and you said, look, here are all the pieces of puzzle that you need to figure out. Their brains will explode and say, what are you trying to tell me? We all know there's a million problems to solve. So that was not beneficial. So to build trust, you actually should just deliver small and have a run, especially running downhill. It's small. And as people build trust in you that you're delivering, then you can ask for larger problems and then build momentum that way. It's not, here's the world of things that I've discovered. And I noticed that about junior designers when they start in these large companies. They survey the land of all the things that are wrong. And then it's this massive chart. And then the first thing is how do you prioritize this? Tell me how you thought about this. Why this one is first, second, or third. And then they would not know how to think about that. So this is where a senior person comes in and say, just focus on the first one. The first one is also a world.
The other interesting thing too, when I think about tenet number 3, achievable now, right? When a lot of those junior designers, and this is not just junior, senior designers, I've seen them do this too. There's all the problems. We need to fix all these things. There's no context. And they don't understand why that decision was made. Some of those things were probably made because that was achievable. And they didn't wait until perfect later. They just did, let's release this thing and we'll assume that debt and maybe fix it later. And as we know, fixing stuff in prod is very hard to do. I think that's the other thing too, where that tenet overlaps with that same mindset where there was context and you don't have the shared history or understanding of why that thing was released the way it was. And if you knew that, you might not be pushing to change it because maybe it wasn't as valuable, or maybe it was just really hard and we couldn't do it, or there was no way to fix it. And you proposing a change just makes you look foolish or naive at best.
Or sometimes it is the right solution. It was just the wrong time. For example, it was too ahead of its time. It was trying to solve for something, and then the people were not ready to solve it that way. There could be multiple factors. So this is all about being adaptable and say, why don't you just ship to learn? What is the hypothesis you're trying to get at in this moment in time? Ship that to learn and make sure that the why is there. So you're almost pressuring the designer to describe the why, which goes back to writing. It's just write out what is the why that you're trying to get at, and not talk about the how it will be done or what it will be done. Just get to the why part, just the core.
All right, let's talk about tenet number 4. Alignment is shared problem definition, not shared solution agreement. I think a lot of people fall into this trap where they assume alignment means we're agreeing. And alignment doesn't necessarily mean that we have agreed on a thing. It just means we understand the things the same way. We just might have different opinions about it. So talk to me about that. Tenet number 4, alignment is shared problem definition, not shared solution agreement. Talk to me about your experience there, and how did you come up with this one, and how do you use this one every day?
Yeah, so this one is more about the constant questioning about principles. What are the tenets we all believe in? Sometimes you won't be able to align on that. And then a lot of people come with different problem spaces. They say, my problem is more important than your problem. Well, how do you know that? Do you know how they know that? They survey sellers. They put out a survey and then they try to rank them. They say, okay, I surveyed 1,000 people. We force them to rank these issues. And basically, these are top ranked on an outcome level. And what you end up happening is that the top 10 of those problems typically get more funding, because you're saying that those problems are the most important. The negative side is the problems that exist below the number 10, top 10, do they get any visibility? No. So it swings back and forth. You say, okay, well, over time, has the problem been improved or not improved? Did it improve enough? And is it time to move on to the next set of 10 things? So that part is more about designers coming up with a framework and working with researchers and influencing the business in deciding that these problems should be above the line versus below the line. And every single problem is important. So that means that nothing is important. So this is a heavily debated area that I don't have a lot of experience in. I can only provide the data points and perspectives and have the other person fight this fight. So it could be my director who needs to make this case up to their bosses. And this happens all the time. We say, we don't have resources to do this. We know it's important. So basically your design goes back to number 1. What design needs to enable that? Do you understand this is the most important issue and we should put efforts in here?
You just mentioned something I think is really important. Sometimes we can't, as ICs, really fix this problem. And you mentioned going your director. I know that you might not be the expert, you might not have all the answers, but I am curious how you handle this. And in the case of a lot of designers, we come into a project in the middle, right? Not all of us are always starting a project from zero, taking it all the way to the end. So a lot of people leave, we replace them, and now we're stuck in the middle and we've already started. And that alignment hasn't happened. When you get into that situation, I'm curious, what is your plan of action to mitigate it, maybe? Because you might not solve it, but how do you work with it so that you can at least get your job done?
Just be constantly annoying. Create visibility. Create a campaign. You are now a campaign master who talks about this, just talking about it all the time. So it actually goes into the next storyline. The brand name generator is a perfect example of what that means. So I'll use that example as a way to anchor this. So not recently, 2023, there was an article that came out on the internet. It says, why does Amazon have so much junk? And that junk means that when you look for a spatula, you get brands like Bank XXX, whatever. And then a series of weird characters. KLAQQQ, whatever. IOC, blah, blah, blah. What happened to the Amazon with all of the names that we recognize in America? KitchenAid, What happened? Well, what happened is there was a bunch of names being generated or created, and people are trying to bring new selection. So we know that exists. But how come no one's trying to solve that problem? That problem's right there. The problem's ambiguous. It says that if Amazon doesn't have any crazy looking names, then the customer experience will be better. How do you measure customer experience? Are you saying that we're going to measure everybody in the world who looks at Amazon and know, like, for some behavioral survey that we know, hey, when you look at these strange brands, they would less likely purchase? It could be true, could not be true. If the price was right, you might be interested, right? Sure.
I was just thinking about that because it's a trust thing, I would assume, right? I have no idea. Are you making these with like lead? What chemicals are you using? Are you going to poison my family if I buy this spatula? I don't trust BANKKY. I trust KitchenAid and OXO. So there's a trust thing there. But then at the same, as you said, really interesting, and this is like a really interesting economics problem too, it's supply and demand, right? Like, what is the demand for it? If the price decreases, you got a supply and demand curve, more people are willing to buy it if it's cheap enough. So is the answer there just like getting rid of the brand names? Is the answer making things cheaper? Is the answer understanding user preference so that the people who care about quality don't see the cheap crap. The people who care about the cheap crap don't see the expensive stuff. So that's a really interesting thing. I don't know. There's no question there. I was just thinking in my head, it was a really interesting problem.
So then we looked into it and we said, what is this? Where is these weird names coming from? So first of all, you have to define what a weird name is. And what a strange meta question of all time. What do you think a weird name is? Now, if you worked in branding and you come from fine arts, you understand that uniqueness and differentiation comes from having a strange name. Look, Aloe, Nike, are they names that are not strange? They are unique. They're just a vessel for your product to live in. So if someone started a brand from scratch and they have not built up that loyalty yet, how can you just say this thing is weird versus it's not weird?
I'm actually immediately thinking of Anchor or Aki, right? I don't know,
Yes.
You probably know them, but if anybody's not familiar with power cables and things like that, Anchor and Aki, if I'm not mistaken, these are Chinese companies, but they blew up on Amazon and got really popular because they were on Amazon. But when they first launched, no idea. People had no idea what they were, and they built really high quality stuff, so they ended up getting a good reputation. But if I was just searching for a new cable the other day, and it was very
Anchor
specific.
is the hero child use case.
Sure. USB-C, I wanted very specific, USB-C 3.2 6-foot A to C connector. And I found some Aki stuff, or Anchor. One of them got kicked off Amazon because they were doing some shady stuff with reviews, I think. But anyway, I can't remember which one is still on Amazon. But then as I was searching, I got all these weird, just like you're talking about, no-name brands. And I've read so many reviews about how these no-name electronics will fry your stuff if you're not careful. So anyway, it's a really interesting thing. There's a cheapness there, but there's also a quality concern. It'll ruin your $1,000 device buying a $5 cable over a $15 cable. So anyway, roundabout story, just a little anecdote there.
Going back to the strange names, we looked at them. We said, okay, let's just create a guardrail or a quadrant in what we believe a strange means. And strange could just mean a set of randomized characters. Let's just start there. And we discovered that 83% of them came from international sellers. So international sellers could be people who want to sell in the Amazon marketplace, in a US-based marketplace, that they simply use their language and use that to translate to English. So you could technically have a word that is real word that translates itself to English, and it just doesn't happen to make sense to an English origin person.
So you mentioned a few and you wrote them in the show notes, which is why I remember them. But Clacked, Klaqqed, was that a real, a translatable way? Okay.
I just mean another word that someone could have. Imagine if in Chinese, the word dog means go. And then you type the word GUO and it's for dog supplies. So it would make sense. But at a glance, it's okay, that seems strange.
Clacked or Banky or something. It didn't sound like a word I'd ever heard before. So it didn't sound Asian or anything. I don't know.
They have good intentions. Yeah. The point is they have good intentions on the name, but then it just doesn't translate to a US audience, right? So the whole point was, okay, what is the smallest thing we could possibly do with very little effort to test out we can attack this problem a little bit. So what we made was a brand name generator. And you say, wow, what a strange idea. That idea existed a long time ago. When you wanted to get a name for a club or something, you can just type in a sentence and then just have it generate a bunch of names.
So what you guys did, just to be clear, you created a generator for sellers so that the perception of their name would not be quote unquote weird to a US audience. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what's the difference between a regular name generator? So it's why don't you just go to ChatGPT and just generate a name? Why do you need to come to use our tool to make the name? The key difference is that the names are trademarked. So you're talking about trademarking a name in the system that's very volatile. So you have trademark lawyers. So in order for you to trademark a name, let's say you own your own IP, it takes at least 3 to 4 months to get that name, to get a name. So what you ultimately want versus what you'll get is completely two different things. And can we guarantee that the generated names will be final? No, we cannot guarantee that because that requires a lot more intervention in between. But what we can give you is the ability to check the database, the USPTO Patent Office database, and only generate names that are not available. So it narrows it down for you more rather than just say, hey, I think I should create a Nike with a Y in it. We know that will violate trademarks. We know that you can't have a name that sounds like another name. So rather than the seller just randomly coming up with things or paying for a lawyer to help come up with different words, we want it to be like make that process a little bit easier, especially when it's internationalized. So basically what we have is we are targeting international sellers. So for example, Chinese sellers who are bringing in like all of these spatulas, have them create a name that appeals for a US consumer that doesn't hurt our store.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, that's really cool. So let me ask you this: you specifically called it 7.8 billion. What happened there? Was that changing
That
this?
That is the market size opportunity of the number of international sellers who are generating strange names. There's a percentage of strangeness that is coming, and it's a velocity graph. It's like how many strangeness is happening and how much not strangeness is happening. So how do we stop the velocity?
Wow. Okay. So
as it accelerates.
Now, who figured this out? Was this you, or was this like someone came to you with the problem and said we identified this, or was this like something you just came up with, or how did this come out?
Like two disparate pieces. At first, when I wasn't looking for this at all, what I was doing research on growth of a brand. How does a brand grow? Let's just demystify it and look at all of our programs and tools and what are the things that we do not have. I know we have a lot of things, but what's the gap? The area of the gap that I identified was there's no way to introduce or start something from scratch. We assume that someone has already started from scratch somewhere else. So a name could be one, visual identity could be one, logo could be one, all of the things that a traditional designer would possibly think about when they're creating something from scratch, like 0 to 1 scenario. And then we say, okay, I think this area has interesting things here that have not been solved or we could do something in this area to move the needle a little bit. And I think that this part was always below the line. Below the line meaning that it's not that important. We have other things to do. And that feedback was harsh from various groups, from different orgs. It's like, why? The trust factor of Amazon's more important than this name. So like you have competing problem spaces to say, my stuff is more important than your stuff, so we shouldn't do your stuff. We should do our stuff. Whereas I have to say, your stuff is important. This stuff is important too. So it's just about creating the we must win together narrative. So whenever we are speaking to others, it's like, well, what would you win from this? If we had a name that is great for people to put vessel in, they don't have to restart their store from scratch. As having a name is the start, right? So if you don't want this name anymore, you have to delete your whole account. There's no walking backwards. You cannot change that. It's a one-way direction, one-way door, not a two-way. So it's a very like strict box that you're put in. So the only way you can do it is like preventing. And if I said, okay, let's allow people to change it, then do we have a completely different solution? So that was one stream. It was like I was doing discovery. Then I cannot imagine that no one else in this whole organization has ever thought about this. And of course, I found who was looking at this. And that was the leader in China. The leader in China said, all of our sellers in China want to bring more selection, and they're just creating these names, and we want to educate them. How can we educate them if there isn't anything to help them through this? So we must make this. And I knew that we were on the same problem space. And then now our org is not on the same problem space because our org has all these other priorities. So eventually what needed to happen is these two leaders need to be in the same room and have that sort of like a push.
So I want to close this out and tie this up together all nicely with this sort of realization that y'all knew this, but as individual contributors, we often have very little direct authority. And these tenets that we talked about today help us think about how we can frame conversations so that our team, non-designers, take us more seriously and don't think we're just like playing with crayons all day. That last example that you just talked about where you were trying to get these people in a room to solve this $7.8 billion opportunity, as an individual contributor, no direct authority to say, leader in China, talk to this person, blah, blah. How are you able to influence that decision to start investing into this problem to see how Amazon could solve it and improve? How did you do that?
Provide the data points from research. After the research, I drew a diagram for the framework. Like I said, we have conviction and use the visual, like this is where the craft comes in, execute on designs on what a generator would be, execute designs on the framework of how this will work or how it would help other orgs and how it fits into the larger piece puzzle, like in a succinct way, like 2 images. And then be in the room, keep talking about that you have have conviction this is the smallest thing we can do to test it out. And I don't think anyone would argue with that because it is very small. That's the beauty of small things. You don't have a lot of complexity to argue against. So the complexity part is this invisible problem worth it? Well, it would be worth it because it was cheap.
It didn't cost us anything. So again, if we were wrong, why does it's not going to impact the business? So I'm curious, I don't know you all that well. We've only talked a couple times, but you seem very direct and you seem like very opinionated and you have very clear goals and you seem like you don't beat around the bush. In your experience dealing with a place like Amazon, maybe that type of personality thrives at a place like Amazon. But I'm curious for some who might be worried about overstepping, or as an individual contributor, we aren't in charge. Unless we're a super IC, we're pretty low in the totem pole. How do you avoid overstepping? How do you avoid stepping on toes and pissing the wrong people off when you're having these types of conversations?
I think that this is definitely my personality, and my personality is just state your opinion and then say that. And in the back of your mind, you are always flexible to be proven incorrect. But I never hedge my opinion first, because the person that is listening doesn't feel confident. So what is their takeaway from your conversation? Do they want to take away from the fact that they're confident and they heard you and they're believing in that? That's what you want, right? You want to instill confidence in someone else that you're looking at it properly, but at the same time are not overly ambitious and saying, I have all the answers and follow me to the ends of the earth. And I always think about this analogy that I'm like Frodo Baggins in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
Where I'm like, you know what? The only thing I have is the courage to say this, but I don't have anything else. I don't have the power. I don't have everything else. But you know what? That's what you have.
But you got all that data.
What do I have? I have a job to do.
Yeah, and you've got all that data. You've got all that data that you've been getting. A lot of times that is hard to ignore. And yeah, I know it's a really interesting conversation to have, because I know, especially as a woman in a big, giant corporate environment like that, I know my wife works in a giant company, and it's one of those things where as a woman navigating that on its own is probably really challenging. And I say this as a white dude who's got a lot of privilege. I know that I'm worried about that a lot. I imagine a woman in a similar situation might have extra things that she's worrying about. And it's really interesting to kind of hear your perspective. But I think this is why the customer obsession piece is so important. Having that data makes it really hard to ignore that data at the very end of the day. It doesn't matter who it's coming from. This is a quantifiable fact that we have uncovered. You can't ignore me. So, Kat, we've had you for a while today. This has been an awesome conversation. I feel like we could have talked about these things in depth. Each could have been an hour-long episode. Before we get out of here, just one last piece of closing advice for any designers who feel like they're stuck without any influence, without any real authority. How do they take some of the things we talked about today and start to build that influence in their own personal career?
So if you think that you're stuck at the vision level, meaning that someone keeps asking you to keep making mock-ups and everything, you can go to tenet number 1, which is find the smallest testable truth, right? To build trust and conviction. If you're stuck at the execution level and decisions keep getting changed or whatever, you need to be doing tenet number 4, which is checking if you're aligning on the same problem. And if not, then you need to do something about aligning the problem, okay? And then if you don't know what to do next, right? If you're just sitting there and you're like, I already solved this problem in the problem space, maybe you need to do number 5, which is look around the corner. What are the invisible problems that no one's looking at, and then point them in that direction?
Like I said, I probably could have talked to you for God knows how long about each of these individually, but we'll maybe have to have you come back and we'll do a follow-up. Before we get out of here, I got a few questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. You got some time to stick around.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. Yes.
All right. The first thing that comes to your mind, by the way, you don't have to think too hard about it. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Okay, I have 2 favorite ones. One I have read multiple times, and the other one I have not yet read. The first one is this one, The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. And this is talking about practical tips on navigating new roles. How do you secure early wins? And I read this multiple times because our projects are always new. It's not about having a new job, but a new topic. The second book is a comic graphic novel. And I have not yet read because this is brand new. It's called Thinking About Thinking by Grant Snyder.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
I'm so excited about somebody drawing a book about thinking.
Yeah. No, is this like,
this just excites me.
Design thinking kind of software related, or is this just more like thinking in general as a human thinks?
Thinking in general as a human. I
love that. That's really cool.
In comics. And this is a guy that I follow on Substack. I just love his comics.
Right on. Hell yeah. And does he have a bunch of other books as well? Graphic novels too? Or is this just like the first graphic novel he's done?
No, I just don't know.
Oh, that's okay.
I read his Substack and he posts cells. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that cell's awesome. That sounds awesome.
Awesome. I love it. Cool. I want to check that one out too. That seems like a really cool book. All right. Next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
I listen to a lot of Lenny's podcasts.
Lenny's
I listen
podcast?
to a lot
I
of
like Lenny's,
PM thinking.
Know
Yes.
thine enemy. I love it. So what do you also sign up just so you get all of the sweet discounts on Lenny's podcast too? I'm sure that's
Because I feel like my current design persona is more closely to a product persona instead of an execution persona. So I really love to see how AI has changed the landscape for product people. And being a generalist, you kind of want to have like the critical thinking of a product and the execution. So it's just fascinating to see what PMs are doing with vibe code.
No, that's great. That's a great idea. That's a really good idea. I love that too. Yeah, get inside your partner's head. I don't want to say enemy. They're not, even though a lot of designers like to consider them enemies. I make a joke whenever I meet like a designer who's become a product manager that they've gone to the dark side. You're like dipping your toes into the dark side without fully going in. I love it. All right. Next up, what is your favorite meal?
Oh, I got it. Bubble tea. I know bubble tea does not sound like a meal. It'll go to when you're like, you know what? I'm fried. I just need a
minute. I love that. What is your favorite flavor of bubble tea?
Depends on my mood. I usually go for a fruit non-dairy tea, green tea with lychee.
Yeah,
it's nice.
I love that.
Too cold right now in New York to have a bubble tea.
Yeah, is it not? Has it warmed up yet? We were like negatives a couple of weeks ago in the Midwest here. But you guys are y'all still freezing?
Yes, it sounds like it's gonna snow soon, and they have introduced hot bubble tea, which no, I can't.
Bubble tea.
No, hot tea with tapioca pearls.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have to be honest. It's not like authentic bubble tea, but I really like the sort of dairy creamy ones. Not necessarily dairy, but just like the creamy flavors. There's a place by my house that does an avocado bubble tea, which there's probably no tea in it. I don't know if some of those even have tea.
The smoothie.
It's more like a smoothie or like a milkshake, but it's really good. My kids like bubble tea as well. And there's a coffee shop by our house that does tea as well. The family that runs it, they have a Chinese restaurant and they're from Taiwan. And so they do a lot of tea as well.
Taiwan.
Are you really?
Yes.
Yeah. So they do a lot of tea as well. Actually, her family has a tea farm in Taiwan. And so they get a lot of like tea that their family grows. But anyway, they do like bubble tea, but it's not like bubble tea like my kids are used to. It's like basically iced tea with ice in it and stuff and with the tapioca balls. And that really confuses them because I think they think it's more like a smoothie. But anyway, my kids...
Bubble tea is just the bubble part.
It's just the bubble part.
A drink of your choice.
It's not really like the frozen thing ever like most Americans think of. I love that. Americans, we Americanize everything. All right. Next up, what is your favorite vacation spot?
I visited Asia for the first time in 20 years last year.
Oh, nice.
Top of mind, I love Kyoto, Japan, mainly because it's so calming and serene and beautiful landscape. So
I love it. I've never been.
That's my new favorite.
I would, at some point, getting over to Asia is on my bucket list. There's so many places to go. Japan's up there, Thailand's up there.
Copenhagen as well. Copenhagen is the design dreams spot. All the buildings are beautiful.
Yeah.
You have industrial designers there. You can go to the museum with all the beautiful chairs and you can actually buy them.
No way.
And you say, you know what? We live in the pits of America. Like, this is the most beautiful design place. I need to buy everything, ship it to America, and not have it be copied.
Yeah.
by West Elm or Crate and Barrel.
Yeah. Or if I'm like the cheap knockoff on like Temu or something. Hey, if you get what you can get, and I don't knock people who can't afford fancy shit like that. You get people like their stuff and get it where you can get it, man. That's what I say. All right. Last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Man, I don't know how to answer this question. I feel that designers right now are just being flooded with different tools doing different things. I've dipped my toes into multiple things and it's just hard to understand like what is better than the other. I've used religiously Claude for a really long time. I've stopped using ChatGPT a year and a half ago and I solely use Claude.
Yeah.
I would say that's my favorite design tool.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it's not Figma.
So let me ask you this. So you used ChatGPT for a while. What was the switch like?
I think that when ChatGPT came out, everyone was excited. Well, I was excited as well. And then next, Claude came out and Claude promised that it was ethically sourced data. So I said, I would like to be ethically sourced. So I stopped using ChatGPT. And also the results of ChatGPT sounded very robotic.
Yeah.
And then as Claude keep advancing, the results just incrementally improved reasoning, benchmarking, just so much better. And now I guess my new favorite is Notebook LLM by Gemini, which I also find that was incredible in terms of identifying sources. So now I play between Claude and Gemini for critical thinking.
I love that. Yeah, so I've been using ChatGPT for a while, and I've got a bunch of projects and all that crap, and everything's in there. And the only reason I haven't switched to Claude is just because all the data, getting the data out and moving it. Is it that easy? I don't know. How was that moving all your stuff from ChatGPT to Claude? Was it seamless, or did you have to feel like you had to rebuild it?
Claude recently just released the co-work functionality where they allow you to select a localized folder on your computer. You do no longer have to drag and drop it into their workspaces. So that becomes scary easy because now you just point it to a folder and say, look at this folder. Mm-hmm. So now it's all about me aggregating my files and into a coherent manner. Or Claudebot, just let it loose on your stuff and see what happens. Yeah. Which I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for something to read all of my secrets.
I know, right? I've got just so much crap, like projects and things, like for Beyond UX Design. I've got one, and I've got my wife and I do like a Cub Scout, like an Etsy shop where you sell like Cub Scout related clothes and things like that on Etsy, t-shirts and stuff. And I have it help me write like all the stuff for the descriptions and all that shit. Anyway, I do have a bunch of crap, and getting it all out of ChatGPT and the Claude I'm like, oh God, I don't know. That's going to be...
Don't.
Yeah, I know. Just leave it there. Just start
until
over.
Until it reaches critical mass and say, you know what? It's worth it to move all the things.
Yeah, I need to do it. All right. Awesome. All right, Kat, this has been an amazing conversation. I have really enjoyed talking to you about all these little things that get us stuck and keep us moving forward and all the traps that we fall into. This has been an amazing conversation. Like I said, we could have gone deep into each one of these and spent probably an entire episode on each one of your tenets here, but I love that you're thinking about this, and I appreciate all the work that you're putting out there into the world. Before we leave, that's the last thing to do is just give your work a plug. You've got a Substack, if I'm not mistaken. Let everybody know where they can find you and read all your work and all that stuff.
Yeah, I try to help multiple designers with their questions, and when I hear the same question repeated over and over again, I try to write out what I think about how to attack those. And it's really a personal writing blog, and it's called fangboss.com. FAANG for corporate. Thank you very much. You can find me on Substack or on that URL. So
hell yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And we didn't mention this, but you are a very close neighbor with a very good friend of the show, Hong Shu. And we didn't mention that before, but it's really funny. I was like hanging out with Hong, and oh God, it's been a year now. We were in New York City over Christmas break between Christmas and New Year's in 2024. And Hong and I were hanging out. We got some food and stuff. And he's very tall. I knew he was tall because I could see that he looks very tall in some of his pictures. But good God, he is gigantic. I don't know how tall you are in relation, but when you see him in person, I'm like, good God, he's huge.
That was really funny. One day I got a message on LinkedIn where he said, he just said, hey, it sounds like you could make an AI conference. And I said, no, I don't have time for that. And then randomly I said, hey, I live on this street in Brooklyn. And he said, what do you mean? I live on that street. And I said, what do you mean? So then I said, what's that? That's a little creepy. I'm like, what's the number? Because that's very rude. And I found out that our buildings share a wall. So I didn't really believe that at first. And I said, please, just go outside right now. Just leave your house.
Out. Take your little pups out.
Just go outside.
Go for a walk.
So we went outside and we saw each other. And it was...
That's you from the internet. What's up? Yeah, that's so funny. I love that. We didn't talk about that before. I completely forgot to mention that.
Your heroes on the internet for the first time. You're just like, my God, why are you so tall? And it's wow, you live next door to me. How come we don't see each other on the street? I'm like, I don't know.
Because he's always walking his dogs and stuff. Yeah.
I was like, no, I walk in the back. You walk in the front.
That's really funny. I love it. All right. Yeah. I didn't mention that before. I figured before we get out of here, it'd be good to mention you guys are our neighbors. All right, Kat, one more time. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Everybody check out the Fang Boss online and follow Kat and learn a thing or two. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you so much. It was awesome talking to you.
Well, all right, y'all, that's it for Kat and me for today. If this episode got you thinking about how to get in that room where the decisions are made, I'd love to hear your take. Send me a message on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. And if the show's been helpful, the best way to support it is simple. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a quick review. That helps me way more than you know. And if you want to go a step further and keep the show independent and ad-free, check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. You'll get early access to episodes and the full video archive for as little as $5 a month. Everything else, episodes, newsletters, show notes, they live at beyonduxdesign.com. And if your team is tired of reinventing the wheel every time a new project kicks off, Mobbin gives you access to over 600,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows, all searchable with AI. It's the kind of tool that makes the whole team faster. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and see why more design teams are making it a company-wide staple in 2026. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.